On the 8th of December 2025, a game simply called Skate Story was released. Created by one developer, by Sam Eng. That's his name, by the way, not Sam Eng, but by Sam Eng. Yeah, whatever, dude. This is a game where one soul has to eat the 7 moons of hell to escape it, drink some milk, converse with floating philosophy heads, all while skating. You fight the moons by performing tricks, you chase distant horizons at 25 miles per hour, the ground is on fire and skeletons ponder on love. All the while the most vibe-filled experimental psychedelic pop blasts your ear out. Skate Story has so many layers of passion and indie feel slapped onto it. It feels divine. It feels, in some ways, like the epitome of what an indie game is. And then there's Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It is one of the best games I've played. The narrative is deeply affecting, the characters are incredible, the combat is fun and engaging, and the soundtrack is impeccable. But it has gathered quite a lot of, let's call it controversy lately, due to the fact it won Best Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33!
The devs, however, have called it a AA game. It had a budget of $10 million, 30 employees and even more external contractors, which is significantly more than other indies. And they had a developer call the game by which strictly goes against what the word indie even means, which is independent, in case you didn't know that. No outside funding or assistance, they say, is what's needed for this to be an indie game. This has got so many people upset. It should not have won Best Indie, when it isn't an indie. Something like Hades 2 should have won instead, or, you know, Silksong. Games that were developed and funded by the developers themselves. Anyway, let's take a look at Skate Story real quick, and oh no. Skate Story, by this definition, is not an indie game. Okay, this is something I feel like I really want to talk about, and since you're here, I feel like I'm making this your problem now as well, which you're just gonna have to live with. The discussion of what is and isn't an indie game has plagued the gaming community since like the dawn of time at this point. On the 5th day, God said, let there be indie games. But then some fuck-ass Judas just came in and said, actually, these games are funded by the Navajo. The Navajo are time travelers now, I guess. In order to fully explore this, I think we first need to talk about what makes an RPG. To some, defining what an RPG is easy. It's a game where you play the role of one or several predetermined characters, make meaningful choices as said character or characters, and get to live out their life through a specific narrative-driven situation, and often with progression, like leveling up and stat building. Think V in Cyberpunk, Geralt in The Witcher, or Henry in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This game had such heavy RPG elements woven into its core gameplay and choices that actually affected the world. It truly felt like experiencing this story through the lens of this man, allegedly. I don't know, I haven't played it. So much so, in fact, it was even nominated for Best RPG of the Year at the Game Awards.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33!
An award that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 won, and now everyone is arguing whether or not that is an RPG. Okay, just having a look at the best-selling role-playing games of all time, according to fandom. I mean, this is Soulsborne? Soulsborne is not a game. It's a fucking Shut up. It's a series of games. Kinda. It's not even a series of games. It's just games FromSoft has made. It's just FromSoft games. That's not a game. You can't put that on a list. There's some other games here that shouldn't be considered RPGs. Maybe that's a bad way to put it. Black Myth Wukong? Is Black Myth Wukong an RPG? You play as Monkey fighting bosses. It's a boss rush game, is it not? Wait, what makes Black Myth Wukong an RPG? Fast-paced, skill-based action with deep character progression, featuring leveling, skill trees, gear customization, resource management, and collecting / using enemy abilities to enhance your destiny. Black Myth is not... Be real. Be real. Black Myth Wukong is not an RPG. Just because you play as a monkey. See, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. Every single game that has you playing a character considers itself to be an RPG. Do you make choices in Black Myth Wukong? I haven't played the game, by the way. So here's my review. Okay, you make choices, like skill customization. You make choices like skill customization. Guys, Black Myth Wukong is an RPG. It says so right here. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this. Anyway, Elden Ring Night Rain. Night Rain is not an RPG. Hang on. Yes, Elden Ring Night Rain is an action RPG, but with significant roguelite elements and a strong focus on session-based RPG. Why? Why is Night Rain? Why is Night Rain an RPG? I mean, it's not. Traditional RPG elements like character progression, loot, skill-based combat, and fantasy. Hang on. Is Stardew Valley an RPG? Most definitely. Shooters like Call of Duty fall under that as you play the role of a character throughout some narrative. That being said, I do agree with... Is Minecraft an RPG? Minecraft isn't a traditional RPG, but it's a sandbox game with strong RPG elements. Now I know this is an AI overview and AI isn't very intelligent despite the name, but we can't do this, guys. We can't do this. I'm going to lose it. I'm going to snap. Role-playing games typically rely on highly developed story and setting, and characters are typically designed by the player. See, the word typically is just fucking sprinkled all over these definitions. Typically this, typically that. What about what is an RPG? Give me a definitive definition, because right now every single game ever created could be classified as an RPG if you really wanted to. If you really wanted to stretch that line thinner than it already is. Soon there is no line. There's no line. Everything is an RPG. Everything is an RPG. Everything is an indie game. Mind you, before the Game Awards, everyone was praising this game as the best JRPG adjacent game since the last actual, Japanese RPG. More like JRPG. I stole that joke. But still, whoever I stole it from wasn't nearly as robbed as the team behind Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I bring this up because defining an RPG is getting exceedingly harder for every year of games. The term RPG is slapped onto everything now. I think it can be broken into two silos. One, it's a role-playing game in the sense that you assume the role of a character. Any character. This is much easier to define. Either you play a specific character or you don't. Two, it's a role-playing game in the more theatrical sense of the word, immersing yourself in a character, its world and the narrative surrounding it, building yourself up over the course of the game. This also doesn't exclude games with character customization. But people that are way smarter than me have discussed this and come to better conclusions. My point is the term RPG has faded into obscurity. Whatever makes a real RPG these days is now based on vibes. Diablo and Path of Exile are classed as RPGs, but I wouldn't put them in the same conversations as I would with The Witcher 3. This, I feel, have started to apply to indie games as well. The term has gotten so loose and undefined. Clair Obscur is not an indie game because it has a publisher. Except so does A Hat in Time, Signalis, Outer Wilds, Ori and the Blind Forest, Skate Story, Lunacid, Mouthwashing, Katana Zero, Ultra Kill, Dusk, you get the point. But they get to keep their indie status, because there is a second part that defines what makes or breaks an indie game. Okay, look, I know, using Wikipedia as a source, but just the definition here is: an indie game is a video game created by individuals or smaller development teams and typically without the financial and technical support of a large game publisher. Now we have two problems here. One, the word typically, again. Two, a large game publisher. Okay, so as long as the publisher isn't considered large. But where do we draw the line between a large and a small publisher? I can't just look at what makes Devolver. Is Devolver a large publisher? It is generally not considered. That is not definitive. Are they or are they not a large? Devolver isn't considered to be a large publisher, but they're arguably, if not the biggest indie game publishing company out there. Kepler Interactive isn't considered a small publisher, but a large one. And the fact that they published Expedition 33 is one of the main reasons people claim the game isn't indie. As of 2024, Devolver's reported revenue was over $100 million. The sources for these numbers are scarce, but Kepler Interactive's reported lifetime revenue is around $262 million, which is only roughly 25% more than Devolver's revenue nearly 6 years ago. Okay, but Devolver is a small publisher because they only support indie developers and promise full creative freedom to them. Yeah, and Kepler makes the same promise. It's in the press kit. Kepler also published Sifu and Pacific Drive, yet I don't see people claiming these games aren't indie anymore. As a matter of fact, Kepler has only published what we consider to be indie games, just like Devolver. So, what separates them? Well, Clair Obscur had a budget of slightly below $10 million as confirmed by the developers. Is that the line between an indie game and not an indie game? What is the correct amount of money to give developers as funding for a game for it to still be considered indie? Is it below $1 million? Or does it not have to do with money and instead have to do with the fact Clair Obscur's dev team was 30 people, which doesn't feel very indie? I don't raise these questions to defend this game's indie status. I agree it should be considered AA and not indie, but I base that opinion on general vibes, not fact or definitions. I love Clair Obscur, I love Devolver, but this conversation about what is and isn't an indie game feels so tired at this point. If the criteria for what makes an indie game indie is simply no funding from a large publisher or any publisher at all, then Cyberpunk 2077 is an indie game. However, if you also add that the team has to be small, then we need to start defining what the correct number of people is needed for something to be considered small. If it's 8 people, will hiring a 9th person suddenly make it AA and not indie? Because right now all these definitions are vibes-based. The industry doesn't know what defines them. The gaming community won't stop arguing about what defines them. Everyone wants their favorite game to win the big award from Daddy Jeff and are willing to bend heaven and earth to make the definition fit their game. I don't have answers to these questions. I think the point I'm trying to get to is you should really play Skate Story. The game is sick.